passenger jet bound for Shanghai suddenly catches fire over the Pacific Ocean. In an instant, 257 lives plunge from 6 miles up into the deep sea. But the crash is only the beginning of the nightmare. Sharks circling the sinking wreckage signal that the real danger has only just started. The cause of the crash was almost absurdly simple. Before takeoff, a passenger nicknamed Longmao, Longhair, found his tablet had suddenly died. He pulled out a power bank and used a nearly frayed charging cable to recharge it, getting shocked himself several times in the process. Worried about the faulty cable, he didn't dare keep holding it, so he simply stuffed it into his suitcase. This should have been caught during security screening, but the security staff were busy on their phones and missed the warning on the X-ray screen. The suitcase was loaded onto the plane's cargo hold, and true disaster was about to begin. The plane soon reached cruising altitude over the Pacific. Unaware of the danger ahead, esports player Lisa had wanted to confess her feelings to Sam, but lost her nerve and instead handed him a letter. Sam slipped off to the restroom to read it in private. Meanwhile, a remarried couple suddenly felt a spark between them, but mindful of the husband's daughter nearby, they decided to sneak off to the restroom instead. That's when disaster struck. The faulty wiring in the cargo hold finally burned through the fabric of the suitcase, leaving it riddled with holes, just as the unsuspecting couple were getting intimate. At the same moment, smoke began billowing from the suitcase, and then flames erupted. In the cockpit, co-pilot Old Bai and the captain calmly activated the fire suppression system, only to find it had malfunctioned. Old Bai radioed air traffic control. With the plane on fire, they needed an emergency landing. Controllers directed them toward an island some 400 nautical miles away. Realizing the automatic fire suppression had failed, the two pilots decided to send crew members down to fight the fire by hand. But by then the flames were already raging, and the handheld extinguishers proved hopelessly inadequate. Right at that moment, the plane hit severe turbulence, and a full-blown disaster began to unfold. A breach in the fuselage's underside created a pressure differential that generated enormous suction, sending objects flying through the cabin and injuring countless passengers. Captain Richard immediately ordered a descent, but the crisis was far from over. Even though many passengers had already put on oxygen masks, the powerful suction tore open the overhead luggage bins, battering passengers yet again. Fortunately, the plane managed to descend to 10,000 feet, and Richard moved to calm the cabin.
This is the captain speaking. We have a fire in the cargo hold. Descend it to a safe altitude and diverted to Guam International Airport.
Meanwhile, Sam suddenly thought of Lisa and bolted from the restroom, prompting a flight attendant to anxiously order him back into his seat. In the cargo hold, the turbulent airflow through the breach kept slamming cargo against the fuselage until the structure could no longer hold. A chunk of engine debris tore a hole straight through the cabin, and passengers once again found themselves staring death in the face. In the cockpit, the captain discovered the hydraulic system had failed completely, and every instrument reading dropped to zero. With no other option, the crew manually deployed the ram air turbine to bring the instruments back online.
Reload the engine.
Hit it again.
But the engines could no longer be restarted. By now they had dropped below 6,000 feet, with no room left to dive for extra airspeed. Richard was forced to make the heaviest decision of his career, dump the fuel immediately and attempt a water landing. The crew worked to align the plane parallel to the swells, raising the wings and lowering the tail. The aircraft finally struck the ocean surface at an airspeed of 170 knots. But to Richard's horror, this stretch of ocean concealed an underwater mountain ridge close to the surface, and the passengers were thrown into chaos all over again. When the survivors came to, they faced a scene straight out of a nightmare. The nose of the plane had completely separated from the rest of the fuselage. The nose and midsection were still floating on the water, while the tail section was nowhere to be seen. Surviving flight attendant Zoe, after comforting a young girl named Kara nearby, rushed to check on the cockpit, only to find Captain Richard's leg pinned hopelessly inside. Old Bai and Zoe grabbed a crash axe and tried desperately to free him, but couldn't budge anything. Worse still, most of the nose section, where the cockpit was located, was already submerged, and the windshield was about to give way. To keep seawater from flooding in and sinking the nose entirely, Richard ordered Old Bai to leave him behind. Old Bai had no choice but to comply. As he left, Richard reminded the two of them to head for the midsection immediately and activate the emergency locator transmitter. The moment Old Bai stepped out of the cockpit, he was confronted with sheer carnage. Meanwhile, Richard took out a photo of his wife and child and began softly humming to himself. Just as the windshield finally shattered, Old Bai understood all too well that the nose section was about to sink. If they wanted to save as many passengers as possible, they had to act immediately and reach the midsection to activate the emergency transmitter. Penny, a former champion swimmer, volunteered at once, and for the sake of speed, she even skipped inflating her life vest, diving straight into the water. But Kara, watching nearby, quickly sensed something was wrong.
Sir! Shark!
Penny, already halfway there, mistook the others' frantic gestures for encouragement. Left with no choice, Old Bai hurried to assemble a life vest, fitted Kara with a flotation ring, and the two of them rushed toward Penny. At the same moment, a shark was slowly closing in on her. A A moment later, Penny realized the danger too, but it was already too late. By the time Old By and Kara reached her, the water around them had turned a deep red. Meanwhile, passengers in the midsection had regained consciousness and stared in horror at the carnage before them. Because so many of them had gathered near the fracture point, the weight caused the coral reef beneath them to suddenly shift and slide. Quick reflexes saved a woman who had slipped into the water. Sam urged everyone to step back to keep the structure balanced. Some tried to comply, but they hadn't yet noticed the shark in the water. It turned out to be Lisa, who had fallen in and was desperately swimming back. The next instant, a man was suddenly dragged under by a shark. Bystanders moved to help, but this stretch of water belonged to the sharks now, and both men were lost. The man's son, a boy nicknamed Shohei, turned on Sam in a fury. If it hadn't been for Sam's suggestion to step back, his father would still be alive. Chaos erupted, but Old By arrived just in time to defuse it.
You wanna live? Do you?
Long Mao, however, started taunting the others. If it weren't for their junk plane, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Old By could only try to calm everyone down. Simply being alive was already a stroke of luck. The plane had originally carried 257 people. Now barely 20-some remained. Under Old By's direction, the group deployed the self-inflating life raft, while he made his way toward the underside of the midsection to activate the locator beacon. But just then, Kara began wandering toward the tail section, searching for her father, the same man from the earlier restroom scene. Realizing Kara was in danger, Old By handed the locator device to Long Mao standing nearby and rushed to pull her back. But while he was saving her, the unstable wreckage of the cabin suddenly lurched and began sinking fast. In the panic, Long Mao fell into the water and lost the locator device. After everyone finally made it onto the life rafts, Old By immediately asked about the locator's whereabouts, and his heart sank when he learned it had been lost in the water. Just then, a plane happened to pass overhead, and everyone shouted and waved for help, but it flew straight on without stopping. Still, Old By remained confident they'd been spotted, since the wreckage trail in the area was far too obvious to miss. Now all they could do was wait patiently for rescue. Richard's instincts proved correct. The passing aircraft had already reported their position to the U.S. military on Guam. As a rescue helicopter scrambled to the scene, it also spotted a Chinese deep-sea fishing vessel nearby and immediately called on it to assist with the rescue. Meanwhile, having stared death in the face, Sam finally made up his mind. The moment they were rescued, he would tell Lisa how he felt. Team rules be damned. Young Kara, meanwhile, confided in Old By that her father had always told her to look after her stepbrother, and now he was the only family she had left. To comfort her, Old By pulled out a photo of his own family. It turned out his son was around the same age as her stepbrother. He reassured her they would surely make it home safely. Just then, the U.S. military helicopter finally arrived, and everyone burst into excitement. The crew aboard immediately dropped flares to mark the survivor's position before preparing to lower a rescuer into the water. But Old By and the others were gripped with fear. The waters were teeming with sharks. Sure enough, the moment the rescue diver entered the water, he was attacked by a shark. Realizing something had gone terribly wrong, the survivors scrambled to pull him back up, but he had already been badly injured, and the sharks kept attacking. With the helicopter rescue effort in jeopardy, the Chinese fishing vessel became their last hope. Old By fired a flare to mark their position, but the boat hesitated to approach directly due to a reef-strewn area ahead. After studying the situation, Old By realized they needed to actively swim toward the boat themselves, otherwise the current would carry the raft further out into deep water. But when he looked up, he found Kara had vanished. She had slipped into the water amid the chaos of the helicopter rescue and was now clinging desperately to a floating piece of wreckage, which the current was steadily dragging away from the group. Old By dove in without hesitation to save her. As everyone watched anxiously from the raft,
Help me! I am an American!
the ship's captain, for whom nationality never mattered, kept his focus solely on Old By, who had gone into the water to save the girl. He soon spotted a large group of sharks closing in fast on the pair. Fortunately, Old By and Kara managed to scramble onto the floating wreckage first. Old By then went back into the water, towing Kara toward the life raft. The captain saw clearly that the sharks were once again converging on the two of them in the water, and without hesitation, he ordered the hold opened, sounding the ship's horn continuously to draw the sharks away, planning to lure them off with the fish stored below deck. The tactic worked. Just as the crisis finally seemed to ease, Long Mao lay back on the raft craving a cigarette, only to find his lighter had broken. The Chinese fishing vessel soon drew alongside and began ferrying the survivors aboard in groups. Young Kara, however, kept her eyes fixed on the water, desperately hoping to see her brother and father again. Just then, cell signal returned aboard the ship. Kara suddenly remembered something and borrowed Old By's phone. Her brother was wearing a watch with GPS tracking, and she could use the Find My Device feature to locate him. The signal showed he wasn't far away. Old By immediately found the captain and asked him to turn the boat around to search. They soon found another life raft, but it carried only flight attendant Zoe. It turned out that Zoe had taken the boy and hidden in the broken-off tail section, where a sealed air pocket had formed, allowing the two of them to survive against the odds. Zoe had then fought her way through the wreckage and the bodies of the deceased to get the boy out safely, and the two of them made it through alive. As for Kara's parents, the restroom had also formed a sealed pocket of air at the time, but in a tragic twist, the two of them, fully conscious, made a fatal mistake of their own. In the film's final scene, Old Boy calls home and lets his family know he's safe.